The last situation that you can remember in which somebody crashed out on you, lost their temper, just became emotionally unhinged. And I want you to think about what you did in that situation and how you handled that. Um, as a survivor of spiritual abuse, I'm sure that you have either been in a situation where somebody has lost emotional control and you were on the receiving end of it, or you witnessed something like that. And I get a lot of questions about how to handle that. And so in today's video, I'm going to be talking about some things that you can do when you're in that situation. So I want you to think back to a time where that happened. What did you do? How did you feel? Spiritual abuse for many people carries a lot of trauma. And a lot of times when people have been through spiritual abuse, they have experienced other types of abuse. It might be abuse from a partner, a parent in their childhood or currently. Um, Different situations where people have been abusive. And so, on the receiving end of that, it is not uncommon that when you are in a situation like that, you may respond from a place of trauma instead of a place of groundedness and healing. So, the first thing that I want you to do is that if you are in a situation where somebody is losing control, I want you to make sure that you are physically safe, right? So, like maybe if they're blocking a door or something, you want to position yourself so that you can leave if you need to. So that's the first thing. You want to make sure that you are like physically safe. And I also have some information in the description box about places that you can call if you're in a situation where you don't feel physically safe. It's really important that your safety is prioritized. So that's the first thing you want to do. Make sure that you are like physically safe. Um, and then the second thing I want you to do is I want you to gain the right amount of distance. Now, when people are in a situation where somebody is losing control emotionally, so they could be yelling, they could be threatening you, they could be breaking things, throwing things, whatever it is, you are going to be feeling all kinds of stuff inside, I'm sure. Whether it is feeling, like you are going to lose control, feeling scared, whatever. And those are all normal feelings. I want to validate that. There's nothing wrong with that. However, what I want you to do is I want you to gain appropriate distance. So I want you to pretend that you are someone watching that experience. When you are in a situation where somebody is losing emotional control, one of two extremes can happen. One is that you can feel very stuck in your body and you are almost like too close to the situation. And so the kind of things that you would do to make yourself safe, you can't do because you're just kind of frozen in your body. And I'm sure that if you have been experienced this type of vitriol from someone else, lack of emotional control, whether it's anger, insults, whatever, you are feeling that. So you don't want to be stuck in your body. At the same time, you don't want to be somewhere else completely, right? Sure, some people, when they have been through a traumatic experience, they dissociate, and that is I guess, your brain and your body's way of keeping you safe. But sometimes people can do that again when they are in a situation where they don't feel safe. And so complete dissociation doesn't help either because you need to be aware and present so that you understand what's going on. If this is a situation where you need to involve like law enforcement, you're going to need to document facts and things like that. So I want you to gain the appropriate distance. Pretend that you are somebody in the room that is watching. You could pretend you are a camcorder, or what is it like video camera, whatever, recording what is going on. But that's the distance that I want you to have. Okay. And then the next thing I want you to do is I want you to ground yourself. If you're feeling stuck, wiggle your toes, wiggle your fingers, something to let you know that you are alive and you're here and that you are documenting what's going on. And then I want you to start writing things down, right? You have to obviously use like common sense with this. If it is something where, you need to prioritize your physical safety, then get out. But if it's a situation, and this is really what this video is about, is where somebody is just crashing out, they're losing their temper, they're just out of control. I want you to start writing down what happened. You can get your phone out and just start documenting what's happening. Like you could say, like, I am being yelled at right now, or I am being accused of something that I did not do. This person is raising their voice. I just want you to write down what is happening. And if you can record safely and it is not violating any laws of where you are, or whatever, use your own judgment. But if you can record, I would do so. Even if you can't, in some states, they don't allow like a recording without the other person's consent to be used in a legal situation. I'm not talking about using recording as a legal situation. I'm doing it so that you know what happened, because a lot of times people who are victims and survivors of abuse endure a lot of gaslighting. And I see this, when I work with people who have been through abuse, a lot of times like, well, gosh, I don't even really know if this thing happened. I can't make, I'm not sure if it happened. Like, was I making it up? Because it's happening right there and then, but you are kind of like an emotional shock. And then, imagine that the person who is abusing you in that moment is also denying what they said and did, then it's very isolating. And so I want you to document what is happening. If you cannot record safely or you don't feel comfortable recording, write it down. And so that you have a document of what happened. But I think that that's, if you don't take anything else away from this, make sure that you are getting down what is happening. Okay, so you're documenting what's happening, um, writing, recording, and then I want you to, when people are crashing out, like what I'm talking about, it usually escalates. And so there's a quote by, I think it's Machiavelli, that says that when you see your enemy making a mistake, don't stop him. And so that's, I want you to take that approach, in that you want to like let them play it out, and and just, I want you to remove yourself from it as much as possible. It's very tempting to want to defend yourself. I have a video about gaslighting specifically that talks more about this. It's called the Jade Method. I'm not going to go into this here, but what I will say is that you don't want to get in the space of like, I have to defend myself and I have to argue. You don't want to do any of that. You want to stay silent. You want to document what you want to document. If there's some things you need to say, you can. You may say something along the lines of whatever you feel you need to, but I would just advise you to not say anything. And then when it gets to that high point, you leave. People have talked about this before in terms of like, maybe performance arts, right? That you leave when the applause is the highest. I don't know if you guys have heard that saying before, but basically, when the applause is greatest, when the applause is the strongest, is when you make your exit. And it's the same thing with this type of situation. When somebody is crashing out and losing their cool and just yelling at you and not retaining emotional control, you need to remember that it is not about you, it is about that person. And you want the spotlight to reflect on their foolishness as much as possible. So that's why when there's a high point, you leave. Now, what do I mean by a high point? What I mean by a high point is when they cross the line, right? So it could be something like an insult that's like really, an insult that takes it too far. You'll know when they've crossed the line, right? It could be a very serious insult that that they like, okay, you've crossed the line when you said that, right? It could be an accusation, it could be something, but they're going to do something, especially if you follow the steps I gave you. They will eventually do something to cross the line, and that's when you leave, right? And the reason I'm telling you to leave at that point is because that is when it's kind of like a cliffhanger. Like, imagine you're watching a movie and then all of a sudden the power goes out, right? So the power goes out, you can't watch the movie anymore, but you remember where the movie ended. And maybe it was at some, cliffhanger. Maybe something really exciting is about to happen. Somebody is about to reveal something, or somebody is about to, you know, I don't know, whatever. Just think about a movie and think about like a cliffhanger in that movie. So you are creating that cliffhanger when you leave, right? So the person may say something, they may do something, and that's when you make your exit. You get up and you leave. If it's in a meeting, you leave. You don't say, I'm not doing this anymore. You just leave. Now, you're going to be talked about, right? Oh, I can't believe this person left this meeting. It was so rude. That's fine. All you did was leave, as opposed to all the stuff they did. And you have what they did documented. So I want you to remember this. I want you to hold on to this, because it's really important that you don't put yourself in harm's way when somebody is losing emotional control. And you also want to make sure that you have the presence of mind to document things, and to keep things and to keep yourself safe. Okay. So those are some things. I also want to hear from you all in the comments. Have you been in a situation where somebody has just lost it, lost emotional control? How did you react? And what were you feeling in your body? A lot of times people will get down on themselves for not doing anything in the moment, right? Like, oh, well, I should have, yelled back, or I should have told them this. And it is an easy trap to fall into. I can tell you that from my own experience. And so I don't want you to get in that space of blaming yourself, because when we have experienced trauma or abuse or anything like that, our bodies and our minds are going to do what they have to do to keep us safe. And we can't really override that. And this is why we work with that, right? What I mean by working with it are the techniques that I talked about: grounding yourself, gaining objective distance, and then documenting things, and then leaving when you need to leave, right? And so I want to hear from you in the comments. I'd like to know, what are some of the things that you have done in situations like that? Were they helpful? Were they not helpful? What would you recommend to others? All right. So I hope you have a wonderful day that is filled with peace. Bye bye.